Well, today is for you guys that don't know, today is yesterday we celebrated our first year at Meet RX and doing the podcast. So this is the first interview of the second year. And what I'm seeing is we're really lowering our standards at this point.
I'm so sad that you've run out of important people to talk to and you're reduced to talking to me.
I'm kidding. No, but anyway, so I'll tell you what, do you go by Daniel or Dan? What's your preferred
Either or, and
you take?
if you knew me in grade school, you'd call me Danny, but I'm not real too particular about it.
Okay, cool. And Wiseman, because you're so smart and
Yeah,
wise.
yeah, and I guess you make a lot of bread, right?
Exactly. I do. I
Yeah.
make a lot of bread. Actually, I'm learning how to bake bread made out of cheese and eggs lately. That's type of thing. Well, tell us about your background.
All right, let me give you.
I was going to say you go by well, at least on Twitter, where I remember running into you initially, Steak and Iron.
Yeah.
And that was your handle, and I think you've had different iterations of that over the last few years. And I think you're turkey and iron right now.
Yeah, seasonally appropriate. So yeah, I'm Steak and Iron on Twitter and most social networks. I'm known as Stupid Robots on Reddit and the Keto Kitchen and a couple other places as well. But I am Dan Wiseman, and I've been doing the low carb thing for about a decade now, and major proponent of it, big fan of it as a way to just address a lot of the problems that just sort of crop up in people's health. Been doing the carnivore thing for a couple years. And it's amazing. And I kind of go back to the beginning of where my story comes from, give you a little bit of background of sort of how I arrived where I am, if you like.
Yeah.
So let's go back to say little steaklet, little rib, burnt end and iron when I was a kid. I was a pretty active kid. I did martial arts. I did dance. I did some sports. And I was pretty fit up until about college, and I moved out pretty early. Moved out at 18, which is used to be the norm, but now it's pretty uncommon. And had a job, paid my way through college. Actually, had a couple jobs usually at any given time. Managed to get out of college with no debt, but I live in Northern California. I actually lived in San Jose at the time, which was a very expensive place to live. And it has the distinction of being the first city on earth of over 1 million people to have a median house price of over $1 million. So working retail, going to college, did not give me a lot of extra resources to focus on my own personal health. I basically ate whatever I could afford. If there was a week where I literally ate nothing but chocolate cake because the chocolate cake mix was on sale at Safeway, for $1. So I ate nothing but cake for a week. And at the end of my college career, I had found that I had spent basically 5 years crafting my mind and my skill set into something that was usable, but letting my body sort of fall away. And the highest weight I saw on the scale was 230 pounds. But I would wager at some point I was probably 15 to 20 pounds more than that. And I tried a number of attempts to sort of lose weight. I did calorie counting. I did vegetarianism. I did raw veganism. I did sort of gluten-free. I actually tried Atkins once in high school or in college, and I got a cold, and I had NyQuil, which had sugar in it. And I said, "Well, fuck this. This is stupid. I can't do this." And I just, gained all the way back after that. But then after I graduated from college, I'm like, okay, I've got some free time. I've got some free money. Maybe I start to get myself in shape. How do you get in shape? Who's in shape? Bodybuilders are in shape, right? Let's go to bodybuilding and see what bodybuilders are doing. So I've had no background in nutrition at all. Like, what is fat? What is carbs? What is protein? Are eggs protein? Or beans protein? What are they? So I started learning about what these things are, and the advice was basically sort of what you'd get from any, we'll say, traditional source. Protein is what you make your muscles out of. Carbs is what you run on for energy. Fat is something you have a little bit of to basically make sure you have, absorb your vitamins, but not too much because they don't get fat. Okay, fine. So I started lifting weights. I started watching what I eat. I started doing like calorie tracking and stuff. Lost a little bit, but I was hungry all the time. I was tired all the time. And I came across a sub board within this message board. Our message board is even still a thing. It's like, people just post stuff. And it said keto. I don't know what keto was. But I see these people and they're losing 100 pounds, 200 pounds. These very, very overweight people. And they're saying they're doing it and they feel a lot of energy and they're not feeling hungry. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I read up on it and it sounds a lot like that Atkins thing I was doing. So I'm like, all right, let me give it an honest try. And in about a month of not really measuring anything, just cutting out everything that wasn't, a meat or an egg or, broccoli, spinach, all that stuff, I lost like 20 pounds. Like, boom. And my face slimmed. My joint pain went away. I had a history of neck pain and headaches. And that was all gone. And I said, okay, there's something to this. So I just kind of kept going further and further and exploring, like listening to podcasts, reading books, like, why does this work? Why was I told something so totally different? My initial impression was, okay, this is probably going to kill me, but I'm going to leave a pretty corpse and I really don't care at this point. But then, I started reading like, okay, then what about these, this blood pressure coming down? What about, my skin clearing up? And these are signs of good health sort of objectively, right? I mean, what's going on there? And I became sort of an evangelist of it, to the annoyance of all of my friends. People when they get on keto, they're like, "Oh, you got to do keto. It's the best thing in the whole world. It's going to change your life. It's, whatever. Just drink this cup of butter and eat this bacon, and everything's going to be great." And I got some people actually to kind of join me on my journey there, and started talking to people online. And it just sort of became the way that I lived. And I dropped the initial drop, and tried experimenting with different things. I did some very plant-heavy keto diets, and I did a lot of sort of junk food keto, and I did a lot of the keto cheesecakes and pumpkin pies and all that kind of stuff, and I still do that occasionally. But it got me to a level of health in my 30s that I never had in my 20s. I was always tired. I was, dealing with things like, low libido, muscle pain, back pain, nosebleeds. I felt like an old man when I was 26. When you're 26 and your dick isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, you go, what the hell is wrong? Something seriously messed up here. And every test that would come back would say, no, everything's fine. But I start feeding my body the way it wants to be fed, and the body fixes itself. And that really is what sort of stuck with me, is that the best thing you can do for your body is probably stop poisoning it, right? So then some years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I came across was it Charles Washington and the zeroing in on health thing and the carnivore diet and cutting out all plants. And there were some people that were starting to do this thing, and it struck me first as very childish. I'm like, just eat your vegetables. What do you mean you don't like vegetables? There's 100 different vegetables you can have. There's a million different ways to prepare them. Grow up. And then I saw, probably about the same time you started doing it, this was 3 years ago or so, there was a lot of people that were so like, it's not just about weight loss. It's not just about strength. It's not just about the macros. Maybe you're offsetting some keto junk food with a whole food of meat. I used to say that I'm pretty sure that a cookie doesn't become a health food just because you made it with almond flour and stevia, right? So I'm seeing these stories of people talking, and I think maybe there is something to this. My diet at the time was most of my calories are coming from meat, but I have like big punch bowl salads and big, steam up a whole bag of broccoli with my meat and stuff, and have these very large volume meals, usually eating 1 meal a day. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And it was a very immediate effect where I realized that on a much smaller volume of food, the same amount of calories, because obviously greens don't really have any calories in it, but a very small volume of food, I would be able to eat a pound and a half of meat by itself, and I would be full longer and feel better for longer than if I had the same amount of meat with a giant pile of vegetables on the side. And the sort of lingering problems that I would have is I would ever so often get dandruff, particularly like in my eyebrows. I get dandruff in my eyebrows. I'd get stomach upset, have like bouts of diarrhea and things like that. And I just attribute that to like, oh, maybe I ate some, maybe that meat that had been left over was not good. Maybe something like that. But that was all gone immediately. Hunger just wasn't a thing. Like I wouldn't say I forget to eat, but I love eating. I love food. And without the volume, and you're told, eat big volumes of low calorie food is how you stay full. Doing exactly the opposite is what worked. Having these small volume, calorically dense meals kept me full longer and made me not even think about food. And I started doing it when I was like on the road, because I have to travel a lot for work. I go to trade shows and stuff and be on the road for a week or two at a time. And, rather than go out to restaurants, I just go to the store and I'd buy a couple of steaks and, do my work all day, go to a trade show all day, be on my feet all day, have nothing but water, come back to the hotel room, have a steak, often raw, because why not, and be totally set for another 24 hours. Or travel internationally. I've fasted for 80 hours, 90 hours. Don't even think about it because I had a big steak before I went out. And then it occurred to me like there's really something to this. And, as more and more people have these anecdotes, are we going to come out and say that, okay, eating literally nothing but meat, the best possible human diet, is that even a question we can answer? No. Maybe it is for a lot of people, maybe it is for everyone. I don't know. We can't answer that. But at the very least, we're not all dying and we all feel good and we all are seeing these problems that are often like, undiagnosed from medical science. Like you have this bizarre, your skin or your joints or whatever, and you just say, okay, it's idiopathic. We don't know what's wrong, and it just resolves itself. And you got to at least ask the question: is like, did they get something very wrong at the very lowest levels of nutrition science? And the lie just keeps getting repeated over and over again. One thing I was thinking about the other day was the tongue map. And it's, the experiment you did when you were in grade school where you had like, a bit of sugar and you put it on your tongue, you put salt on your tongue, and you say, okay, where is the tastes on your tongue? It's all nonsense. It's been repeatedly like scientifically verified that is not a thing. But when we were kids, we all said, oh yeah, we can taste the sweet here, and we can taste the salty there. And we wrote our little, reports on it, and we submitted it, and we got our B-. But we were all faking it. It was none of it was complete nonsense. And I think that a lot of that is kind of what happened with nutrition science and, lies getting repeated because the lie is comfortable and the lie is supported by money and the lie is supported by, books and people. And that kind of brings me to where I am now. And I've got this carnivore template. I still eat things that are not meat from time to time because I tolerate them well. I enjoy them, but I don't think of them as food. I think of any sort of non-meat that I consume now as being sort of an adjunct, something to make a meal more enjoyable, rather than this magic green plant is doing some kind of woo-woo for my health, and if I don't have it, my head's going to fall off or whatever. So that's where I am now, and I go on the internet and I go on Twitter and I make fun of people who tell me that they have all the answers because that has never happened in the history of the world. So if you are going to make extraordinary claims, I am going to laugh at you in an extraordinary way. And yeah, that pretty much brings me to today.
Very good. Yeah, I don't disagree with the fact that, we certainly don't know it all. And I think it's just still, we're all kind of experimenting and learning. And, it's great that these people are willing to do this sort of experiment and people aren't dropping dead like flies like they told us we would. So you have to start to question that. Now you said you're traveling a lot, and so what are you actually doing? What do you do for a living?
I am in technical sales. I sell like big capital equipment to semiconductor manufacturers, and there's a lot of trade shows and a lot of events and stuff that are centered around that, and it keeps me from getting too bored. That's for sure.
And are you still in the Northern California, San Francisco area?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still up here in Northern California as my base.
Yeah, and how did you come up with the name Steak and Iron? I assume that the iron refers to weightlifting, perhaps? Is that where that came from?
Yeah. It's just I needed a name. I was literally eating a steak as I was making my Twitter profile, and this was like 8 years ago. I actually made my Twitter profile, and it didn't become active until later. But I was like, I like steak. I like lifting iron. I cook in a cast iron pan. I iron my shirts. Hey, everything all lines up, and it just kind of stuck. It felt like it had like a punch to it. Something you could put on a T-shirt, you know.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be when I first encountered you, there was an issue with either your partner, your girlfriend, or whoever you were with at the time was not a fan of steak being cooked in the house, or something like that. Didn't like the way it made the house smell or something. Is that still an issue? Or no?
We'll say she's not still a big fan of it. My wife, she just is not a fan of beef for whatever reason. She, I guess, just kind of went without eating beef for a long time, lost a taste for it. She finds it to be kind of obnoxious, which is not a big deal. We have joined forces over our love of pork, so that works out fine. And then it gives me an excuse to break out the barbecue and cook outside from time to time. So it's not something that is unnegotiable. Relationships are about balance, right?
Well, and I have a similar situation. And my significant other, my girlfriend, we've been together 8 years. When I met her, she was kind of just transitioning away from vegetarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Her sister still pursues it. It's kind of interesting when her sister and her husband come out to our house. They're eating vegetarian food, and it's kind of funny. They'll come and visit, and they'll bring like a truck full of their food because we've just got like meat-based stuff at the house, a few pieces of fruit for the kids and stuff. But it's just, and it's amazing the amount of refuse that what they're eating increases. Like my garbage, if they're there for a week, it's like I put triple the amount of trash is produced by all the packaging and all the crap. But so she was a vegetarian, and now she's about 95% carnivore. She eats pretty much. Very, very rarely does she eat, anything outside of that. Occasionally she'll have a piece of fruit or stuff like that. But she, one of the reasons, I mean, the nice thing about being where I'm at here in, Southern California is I can pretty much barbecue pretty much 365 days a year. I'll go out there in the rain. It doesn't bother me. And, because she just doesn't like me messing up the damn kitchen with grease splattering all over the place with the cast iron stuff. So that's the concession I have to make as well. So since you've been on, and I would assume Twitter seems to, maybe that's, well, you said Reddit too. I'm not much of a very active on Reddit, and it's kind of I guess all the different social media has its different pros and cons, I suppose. But I've seen you mostly on Twitter. What has been something that is, what has been most surprising to you over the last few years with the way this, I've seen some sort of interesting trends with this sort of, I guess, carnivore movement that has kind of evolved in the last, really 4 or 5 years. We've seen it really, expand. But have you seen anything that's kind of made you scratch your head and say, why the hell are they doing that, or what's going on with this stuff?
I think that we've definitely seen the rise of the carnivore zealot. And it's basically the other end of the vegan spectrum. And it's like, no, everybody can only eat meat, and it's the only way to do it. And damn it, if you eat any pepper on your steak, you're going to screw yourself up, and you're going to give yourself cancer or whatever the hell. And it's like, let's all just kind of maybe calm down a little bit. Some kind of deviation from what we would call perfection is not necessarily a bad thing, because the best possible thing you can do for yourself is the one that you'll do consistently, right? So I see these people that are like, oh, not only do you just need to do beef, you need to do grass-fed, grass-finished, super premium, whatever beef, $40 a pound, American, hand-raised, whatever, pastured, certified beef. And for one, I think a lot of people will just get bored with that. A lot of people can't afford that. And a lot of people, frankly, don't need to. I mean, I've done quite strict carnivore. I've done quite strict raw carnivore for periods of time, and I don't see personally a benefit beyond the sort of 95 to 99% carnivore diet that is my normal diet. So I'm going to incorporate things that I enjoy because I can. I don't think it's harmful to have small amounts of harmful things. I think if you had a cigarette once a month, probably never going to cause a problem. If you have a drink every so often, not going to cause a problem. If you eat broccoli every so often and your body seems to tolerate that just fine, do it. And if your body doesn't tolerate that, I know that a lot of people in the carnivore community have been dealing with let's say mental issues, depression, anxiety, and severe pain, debilitating pain that comes back instantly if they have anything that is sort of going to trigger a reaction in their body. And their first reaction to a person doing something different than their own may be to say, no, don't do that. And then that can in the right echo chamber become this sort of level of zealotry that I think rivals veganism. But I like to use the carnivore template as a way to say, let's dial everything away and go with something that we know is ancestrally appropriate, which is, I'm going to say, meat, and then incorporate other things and see how your body reacts to it. And if you can tolerate it, I mean, some people, they say rice, honey, sugar, fruit, vegetables, whatever. I do fine with this, but I can't have wheat. I can't have dairy. I can't there's some these isolated things I can't have. That's fine. That's where I'm going to find my happy medium, and just let people who are having success have their success. But yeah, the carnivore zealots, I did not see that coming. I just not, because the zeroing in on health people on Facebook were very measured. They're like, this is what we do. This is the rules around it. Not everybody has to do it. But then you have these people coming out of the woodwork like, you got parsley on there. What are you doing? Shut up.
Yeah, when I wrote my book, on the cover there's a sprig of rosemary, and that was very intentional. It was because they showed me image. I said, yeah, that's fine. Put the rosemary because some people use spices, and it was to sort of say it. And if you've read my book, I certainly concede that there are people that are going to do better when they include these other foods in there, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. I did an interview with Business Insider yesterday. I guess it was yesterday, yeah. And I told the gal, I said to the reporter, I said, look, I don't think carbs are necessarily evil. I think it's just contextual on what's contained within it, what's in that food. Some people don't tolerate it, and that I certainly don't know everything, and I'm certainly wrong about stuff. So I think it is helpful because we have people out there sort of trying to, you see the good and the benefit that so many people receive from doing this, and whether they're 100% strict or not, it doesn't really matter. It just matters that they're getting better. And the people that are out there saying vegetables are poison, sugar is the devil, grain finished meat is, from the devil as well as poison. I mean, that doesn't help, I think, the overall context. And I think, like I said, I've said this over and over again. Yes, we do need to support sustainable agriculture. Yes, regenerative agriculture there's good merits for that, and I've promoted that probably more than anyone. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you have these people that are very zealous, it is off-putting, and it kind of paints the whole community in a bad light. Oh, you're one of those people. It's kind of like politicizing it, or saying, oh my God, you're a Democrat, therefore you must be an evil communist, or you're a Republican and therefore you must be a Nazi fascist. I mean, it's just it's not helpful, and I think it's good to see that people.
It's easy and it's lazy. It's to paint everything with a very broad brush, right? If you could take the whole world and divide it into 3 or 4 different boxes, your life is pretty easy, right? At that point, because you don't have to think. You can just get rid of thinking, because everything fits in these 4 nice little boxes. But yeah, it's important to contextualize everything, to individualize things, and to understand that your story is not somebody else's. I saw some messages pop up here about sugar addiction and stuff like that, and that's definitely a hard point for me too. I absolutely am in the camp that if I have a cookie, I will have the whole box of cookies. If I have a slice of cake, I basically need to count the day as this is cake day now, and I'll pick it up and start again tomorrow, because I just don't have that tendency. And we have the people online who are like, oh, food addiction is not real, and you just need to count your calories and this, that, and everything. It doesn't matter. You probably have some idea of who I might be talking about, but the fact is that you don't tell an alcoholic just have one drink. You don't tell somebody who's trying to quit smoking, maybe move to filtered cigarettes instead of the unfiltered Lucky Strikes, right? there is something that happens that prevents. I mean, everybody who's 300-400 pounds knows that they need to eat less, but they can't. Why can't they? Well, something in their brain is going off, and it is overriding the human brain with this very powerful lizard brain that says you need to survive. You are starving. Eat. And at the end of the day, hunger always wins. If you can beat hunger, then you can get, at least on a weight loss context, if you can beat hunger, then you have a chance at success. So that's I just wanted to respond to those comments down there.
Yeah, and it's very. I mean, that's very insightful. I mean, we all know that. I mean, if you like, I like that cake day. You decide to have a bite. If you can justify one bite, you can justify 10, 20, 30, 50, the whole damn cake. I mean,
Yep.
it just happens. And then I guess for some people, they can get away with cake day. Yeah, they feel like garbage. The next day they wake up, they feel like they're hungover, and they're like, I ain't doing that again until I do it again. I'm not going to do that again for a year or never. And then 3 months later, they're doing it again. But for a percentage of people, that cake day turns into cake month, cake 6 weeks, six months.
I'll tell you this.
That's a real problem there.
I'll tell you this. My I had a little bit of a hiccup, we'll say. I had a portion of my life where a lot of things sort of collapsed all at once, and this was pretty deep in my fitness journey. This was maybe 6 years ago or so. I was at the lowest weight I'd ever been as an adult. I was somewhere around 168 pounds, something like what I am now. But I was really grinding to get there. I was counting my calories. I was doing a ton of cardio. Carbs were basically nil. And I was definitely white knuckling through it. And then the wheels kind of fell off a lot of parts of my life. So I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to do the things that made me comfortable when I was a kid. There's a danger. I got the sandwich cookies, the Oreos, the EL fudges, big fan of those. Ice cream, order pizza. And I was like, I'm going to have a weekend where it's just me and video games and movies and junk food. And then I will feel comfortable and I'll get back to the grind. 30 pounds later, 30 pounds in a month. I gained 30 pounds in 1 month. None of my clothes fit. And I kept telling myself I'm going to get back on the wagon again. And I kept finding myself on the way home from work, stopping at the grocery store, buying more garbage. And I'm like looking at myself like, what the hell are you doing? And I couldn't stop. And it was really at that point that I understood addiction. And I didn't understand it before, because part of me on my first half of my journey was like, why doesn't everybody just do this? It's working. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Look how easy this is. Well, my life was all together at that point. Everything was going well for me. I didn't have a lot of drama. I didn't have a lot of things that were making me anxious or sad or upset. And then when that happened all at once, and I went back into the old habits, I had nothing to pull me back out of them. So understanding that, and that was actually a very eye-opening experience, and it made me much more, I think, understanding and compassionate to people who have, backslid. Now I've run into people, and I tell them I'm doing the low carb thing, I'm doing the carnivore thing, I'm doing the, keto, Atkins, whatever you want to call it. They'll be like, oh, I did a couple of times, lost a couple 100 pounds, and then they stop. It's all back, and you feel bad for them, right? Because they know, and nobody that big thinks that they're, they take their shirt off and they look like a rock star supermodel, right? They know whenever they've bent over to tie their shoes that they're not healthy. They get out of breath, I did, and I was only like I said, 230, 240, which is a big guy for somebody. I'm only 5'9", but at that point, I know I was unhealthy. What would I feel like if I had another 100 pounds on top of that and still needed to function in everyday life? So sometimes bad things happen and you can try to learn from them, and that's one thing that I learned a very, very good lesson from.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were that heavy at one point, because I've always seen you've always been what I would assume was a normal healthy weight.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to hear. And so I think it is different. There are people that come from that background, and while I was never kind of morbidly obese, I was at one point 305 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm 6'5", I'm 240 now, and I'm so I can hold a lot more weight than the average person. But even, but at that point, and I was heavily strength training and competing as an athlete, but I still needed to lose weight and lean out, and that was important to come from that. But, it does, like I said, it does take something broken to get to 300 pounds, 400 pounds. I mean, something has to be wrong either physiologically or psychologically to get there. And, whether it stems from something you did as a kid or something happened later in life or just the access to constant garbage that we have.
Yeah.
This is a thing I talk to people when I end up doing some kind of coaching or consulting. Our environment is not going to change. I mean, it's not like magically tomorrow all the fast food places and junk food is going to disappear. It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
So what are there any things you do mentally to say, hey, I'm not going to go down? Is that a daily challenge for you, or is it a routine, or how do you keep yourself out of the Oreos and all that crap, most of the time?
I had a kind of an interesting revelation, and it's sort of a shift in mindset. And this is something I talk about on Reddit and other places where people talk about cheat days, right? Can I have a cheat day? What is a cheat day? What if my mom's coming over, we're going to go out? I don't think about most of the stuff that you find at the store as being worth it. I look at if you look at a pack of Oreos, I love Oreos. Oreos to me are like they're manna from heaven, but there is no love in an Oreo, right? The Oreos are always going to be on the shelf. They're always going to be there. There is not. I mean, we've lived through a pandemic here. We've gone off to war and all over the world and everything else. And we've had all kinds of disasters happen. And planes crash into buildings and everything goes to hell. But the Oreos are always on the shelf because they're not special. They're made by a machine with no love, by the millions, thousands of miles from your front door. It doesn't matter how good they are. They are not special. There's nothing special. They have no power. Same with anything else you see at the store. A loaf of French bread from Safeway, or some sheet pan cake from Walmart, or any of these things. Are they tasty? Sure, but they're always going to be there because they're not special. So when I realized that there's nothing special about them, and if my happiness is actually being prevented by a single box for $3, at Safeway of some prepackaged garbage, I'll just go get it. If that's really what's standing between me and happiness, just go get it because it'll always be there. But if I step back and I say, is that really why I'm not happy right now? Is that really why something is wrong? Will the cookies really fix it? The answer is always going to come back no. It's always going to be no. And this also gives a little bit of a template for me to say, is it okay to have something that is not going to make me feel good? Well, then I put it on a balance scale, right? Like, I'll give you a good example. My wife's 40th birthday was a couple years ago, and we went off to Las Vegas, and we went to the Momofuku, which is David Chang's restaurant, and they had some really interesting craft cocktails. They had some really interesting food there that I will never be able to have again until I go back there. And my wife's never going to have a 40th birthday again. And so I said, okay, I'm probably going to feel a little bit sluggish. I'll probably, maybe my back pain will act up again. Maybe my joints will act up. Maybe my wedding ring will feel a little bit tight. But this is special. This is worth it. And I'm going to take this break. I'm going to have this memory. And then tomorrow's another day. And tomorrow's a normal day. And having that kind of context, and I make the distinction of calling it cheats versus treats, right? A treat is something that you're doing because it's special. A cheat is something that you're doing to move yourself backwards. And I always thought the word cheat was odd because what is a cheat? If you're a cheat at a game, it means you're breaking the rules to gain an advantage. To me, cheating on a diet would be like smoking meth, right? That'd be cheating on your diet because then you're getting ahead by breaking the rules. But cheating on your diet is moving yourself back. So I say, don't say cheats, say treats. And if it's a treat, make it a treat that's actually worth it. Make it a memory. If it's, your grandma, she's 89 years old, she's baked a pie, and she's probably not going to bake another pie until she departs from this mortal realm, maybe have a slice of the pie and then have a conversation and build a memory. But you're at a work function and they've got a dozen donuts from, the store. Who cares? You can go get a dozen donuts right now. Nothing's going to stop you. So that was sort of my mind shift, is I said, okay, it's just not special anymore. It's not food anymore. It's not actually benefiting me. It's just not it doesn't have any power anymore. And that was a mind shift I made that just sort of stuck with me.
Yeah, you mentioned traveling a bit, and one of the and special in the fact that we mass produce. Well, most of the stuff on the shelves is mass produced, and who knows where. When I used to moonlight in hospitals, like when I was in the Air Force, I would sometimes work at private hospitals, and they would put me up in a little hotel room across from the hospital, and usually had a cooking facility. And I would just first thing I'd do is get into town, go to the grocery store, and buy all my food and cook. And so, when you're traveling, well, how much cooking do you do? Is the majority of your food coming from the stuff you cook? Or are you eating out a lot, or what is it? How
On
do
a
you
day
manage that?
on a day-to-day basis, or while I'm traveling?
Well, both.
Day-to-day basis, I buy almost no ready-made foods. I very seldom go out to restaurants. I do basically all the cooking because I enjoy it. But it also just makes it makes it easier. It's far less expensive. I mean, there's a lot of other costs that I have to consider living in Northern California, so my food budget is quite low just because I cook everything in the house. Um, and that also goes for when I travel. I get like a per diem or kind of limit, and by cooking my food, I'm able to get a lot more and a lot higher quality food than if I was to, for example, go to a restaurant and get it. So I could basically go to a restaurant maybe and get a steak, this big, and and it's going to be, a tiny percentage of a meal that they're going to assume you're going to have, a great big baked potato and everything else with it, or I can go get a couple of, a stack of burger patties or something from McDonald's, but it's like, okay, that's not really too satisfying. But with the same, I'll say $40 a day budget that I'd be given, depending upon where I'm going, I can go get a couple of pounds of grass-fed beef and bring it back to the hotel room, a nice, a nice steak, and, eat that while I'm, doing my reports and stuff for the day. And that's a lot more satisfying. It's a lot better. And like I said, sometimes I don't even cook it, which makes things very, very quick and very easy. And I have to imagine, like, who's ever doing my reimbursements must look at my receipts that I submit and be like, wait, he ate like 15 pounds of meat and he doesn't have a kitchen in his hotel room. What the hell is Dan doing? So I don't know if they've ever had any conversations behind my back about that, but it makes it easy. It's one less thing I have to think about, especially when I'm traveling.
Yeah, I guess we'll touch on that because some people are advocates of eating, raw meat. I've tried it. I didn't find it to be for me personally, outside of the occasional, beef carpaccio at a restaurant. I'll have that, but I mean, I'm not a big fan of just gnawing on a raw steak. But how did you decide to do that, and how does it do for you? And I mean, are you concerned at all about potential for contamination or infection?
Well, I think there was like a trend of it at some point, and I was on a trip in Southern California. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to just eat Wendy's patties. I don't want to do whatever. I've got my per diem. Let's try this raw meat stuff. So I just did, I got some steaks and some salmon and stuff, and that was sort of my food for the week. And I will say, yeah, it's less. I definitely prefer cooked meat. Just from like a taste and a texture perspective. I definitely don't like raw, cold, fatty meats. That waxy kind of texture I find sort of off-putting. Like I got a few raw ribeyes that I never leave the fat on the plate, but this I'm like, it's like kind of eating like a half melted candle. I'm not really feeling a lot of joy here, so I just ate the lean parts. And usually if I do go off again and do any travel or decide to do raw meat for whatever reason, just it's usually out of convenience, and I usually do something leaner because I find that to be more pleasant. And it's kind of consistent. Very lean meats you usually get cooked very rare. Like you wouldn't have a well done beef tenderloin or something like that. You want that very rare and seared. And effectively, there's a line between rare and raw at the center where it's kind of arbitrary, right? I mean, it's 110 degrees, it's warm, but it's still raw. So, I mean, I wouldn't do it on a daily basis. And my concern for contamination is fairly low as long as I'm getting like, fresh meat. And I wouldn't probably eat ground meat that is just prepackaged at the store. I think there's a strong risk of contamination if you buy the beef chubs, and just eat the raw meat there. I would be concerned about E. coli or fecal contamination that might get in there. But something actually from a butcher shop, from a decent butcher shop that is, cut fresh, not mechanically tenderized, I think that, the risk is pretty low, and I've never had any problems. So.
With your work, and again, I know with this sort of coronavirus stuff, work is kind of goofy for everybody. A lot of people working from home and stuff like that. But are you having, well, I mean, obviously in the years prior, anybody giving you a lot of grief about the way you're eating, or do you discuss it with other people, or people observe that, hey, you're just eating a bunch of meat? Has that been a challenge for you?
Yeah, it's been kind of funny. I am kind of lucky in that I don't look necessarily unhealthy. I am fit. I have some degree of musculature, but I look like somebody who you would see in your mind as a healthy person. And it's kind of funny because in my own mind, I'm not necessarily that person. I'm still kind of the fat guy, but nobody else that actually interacts with me on a regular basis knows me as the fat guy anymore. So, they will see me eat, and I'll usually only eat once a day, maybe twice a day. And in a work function, I might have a small piece of meat is all that's available that's sort of compliant, and then literally all the butter on the table, or like a ton of cream in the coffee. And I'll get comments like, "Oh man, I wish I could eat like that," from the people in my companies that maybe have some more weight to lose, or you're lucky you have a fast metabolism, or I'll get they had beef top round on sale once upon a time. It was cut thin to be used as taco meat. I bought a whole bunch of that, and I was just, I cut it into shreds and ate it like cereal raw at work, just covered in salt and pepper. And I got a couple of sideways glances, like, Dan, is that just a bowl of raw meat? And I said, yeah. He's like, you're a savage. I'm like, yeah, you are too if you let yourself be. But I do, count myself as kind of privileged in the fact that people can look at me and say, well, whatever he's doing seems to be working, and he's not missing, work for being sick all the time like some people are. So yeah, let him do it. But yeah, I've definitely gotten some sideways glances from people, especially, I've had to travel internationally, and in Switzerland there's a strong meat eating community, but there's also, in my company, there's quite a few vegetarians and people who are like, oh, the granola crunching, everything fresh, organic, whatever, and meat is sort of a condiment, not really the food. They've they've looked at me like I'm completely insane, which I kind of enjoy.
How about family? I mean, they saw you when you were the fat kid. They saw you when you were the vegetarian. Any comments from family or friends from that?
Honestly, not really. My mom saw me get healthy. She just seems to be happy that I got healthy. She has no urge to try anything like what I'm doing. And she's a small person. She's 5'2", about maybe 110, 120 pounds at any given time. And my brother, he's tried low carb off and on. He knows that it works, but he's unwilling to put in the kind of meal prep. He doesn't like cooking the same way I like cooking. I actually enjoy cooking, and that was kind of one of my, going back to college years. I couldn't afford to do much, but I could afford to buy something and cook it. I couldn't afford to go to the theaters. I couldn't afford to go to sports games, whatever. But I could afford to make a nice meal, and I learned how to cook, and I learned to enjoy cooking. And he didn't. So, he knows that it works. He's like, whatever. I'll just be, I'll drink my beer and I'll have my bread, and I'll just sort of, if I get to a point where I'm uncomfortable, then I'll do it, and I'll get back down to the level and let it creep back up again. Yeah, oddly, more from the internet than from anybody who's actually close to me, even though if they've seen me as bigger and smaller.
Yeah, one more. You had mentioned cream and butter, and are you tending? I mean, I guess you tolerate dairy, okay, and I guess you tend to lean more towards a higher fat approach. Is that fair to say, or are you more high protein?
It kind of depends, right? I think I actually function better on higher protein. But I enjoy higher fat. I love fat. Fat makes me feel happy. Like, if I have a lot of butter on a steak, I actually find the steak less satisfying, believe it or not, as far as like appetite satiation. I want to eat more if I put butter on a steak than if I don't. But I find it far easier to eat less food, less calories, if I want to lose weight for whatever reason. Like, I just had to do a life insurance exam, and I did an extended period of time where I was doing some high protein to just drop a little bit of extra weight to get the best possible life insurance rates. But yeah, I enjoy the fat and dairy. Honestly, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't necessarily tolerate dairy very well in certain ways. Like if I have too much cheese, I do notice I get acne. I do get pimples and stuff on my face and my back if I have too much cheese. I do notice that cheese and dairy will disrupt my appetite. I will be hungrier if I have cheese with a meal than if I don't. And a lot of people have noticed that as well. But I don't seem to have any consequences that are necessarily negative enough for me to say, I'm just going to give up dairy forever. I'll go some periods of low dairy or no dairy, and just, like I said, for the time where I was doing high protein, trying to drop a few pounds to get into, XYZ category for, insurance reasons, I'll do that. But I don't necessarily think that it's healthier or better. It's just what I had to do, and I found it to be effective.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. I go back and forth on the dairy. I think that's pretty fair, and a lot of people feel that way. Here's a couple questions are asking about social media and are asking if you prefer Twitter as your preferred social media outlet, and then if so, why do you like that one?
I'll be honest, I like Twitter. I liked Twitter a lot more some time ago. I feel like they've what I got into Twitter for was because Twitter was a unique platform to allow people to talk directly to somebody who is maybe on a different social level than they are, right? It was a way to remove a lot of the gatekeepers. I could go on Twitter and I could talk to, the people I heard on podcasts and the people that were writing the books that I was reading. I could be like, hey, I have a question about this. What is your opinion on this? And I could talk to them, not to talk to their representative, not talk to their gatekeeper, but talk to them. And that was pretty cool. And I liked that. I think that Twitter, as it has grown up, has become itself a gatekeeper. I think that we have seen, things like people being shadow banned or having their accounts suspended for maybe sketchy reasons. People suddenly unfollowing people when they didn't actually unfollow them. I've recently lost several hundred followers for really no reason, and I don't know, was it just bots that they were cleaning up? I don't know, could be, but it seems like something funny might be going on there, and that's leading to the rise of other platforms, like we're seeing Parler and we're seeing the other ones here, which is interesting. I like to see that the tech giants and the sort of de facto monopolies getting a little bit of outside competition, because they're not actually serving the market in the way that they want, the market wants to be served, right? So we may see more activity on these other competitive platforms. But for right now, Twitter hasn't pissed me off enough to actually leave, and I've got a lot of people there that are very high quality people, very good people, very kind people, very funny people. I like a lot of the people that I interact with on there. And compared to other social media platforms, just the directness is about as good as it gets. I mean, we've seen Twitter, take down governments, the Arab Spring and stuff like that. So it's a very powerful tool. And it's very cool. But the weaknesses of having something so centralized, I think, are becoming a little bit more apparent.
Do you have any concerns? Because sometimes, well, I don't know how controversial, risque stuff you'll put up there, but any concerns with work, limiting yourself because of what you might be subjected to if somebody says, hey, this is what I'm saying on social media? Because we've heard about it all the time. Someone says something and then they get fired from their job. Is that ever a concern for you?
Well, I don't think I mean, I will get up in people's faces for disinformation or to putting out things that are, projected as truth, and really they are opinions. Things about you have to eat your 8 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, or your hair is all going to fall out, and your tongue, you're going to swallow your tongue, and your teeth are going to explode, or whatever the hell the latest study says. But I don't come out there and say things that I think are disparaging against whole groups of people. I think the people that get in trouble, they have a media presence that is maybe belligerent to like entire groups of people. We see people that they go back on Twitter and they find out they said some like really racist stuff or some really bigoted stuff, or some really like charged political stuff. And that's not really what interests me. I have my own politics and I discuss them, and I think with anybody who's interested in talking about them. But I don't know of anybody who's gotten fired for saying that steak is good for you, unless you're like from the I don't know, U.S. Dietetics Association or something like that. And I think that I've tried to be a little bit more kind. I think I was, once upon a time I was a little bit more aggressive in things, but I think that the kindness and showing that side of me as well has actually garnered me more followers, because I'm still, I'll still attack it if somebody's being really stupid, but if I want to also have that vulnerability out there, talk about dealing with things like food addiction and understanding that there are big problems, and that food is a very powerful tool, but it is not the only tool, and that there are people that maybe need just someone to talk to, and I'll be there. So I'm not really too worried about I guess blowback, because I don't think I've done anything really too terrible on there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something back there that somebody goes digging that it'll come back to bite me, but I'm not too worried. I'm just having fun.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of tough these days because there's so many things that people can take stuff out of. The one thing I find it a little harder to be nuanced in Twitter with the character limit, and it's kind of even on Instagram, I mean, I'll put up a post and then I'll have a caption in which I try to provide a little more nuance, and most people don't even read the caption and they get all upset by what's in the picture.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a frustrating way to communicate sometimes. And so I prefer, I guess, having conversations with people where you can kind of you can kind of provide the nuance in the background from where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I'll have people where, for example, I post a thing where saying, Americans are eating a lot more fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables now than they were, in the 70s, and yet we're fatter, and we're eating less steak, and we're eating less saturated fat, and yet we're fatter. And people came back and argued with me about heart disease, and they said heart disease is going down, and I said, well, that's death by heart disease, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about obesity right now. And then the studies start flying and stuff like that. It's like, okay, the 280 characters is not really the right place to have this discussion. And this is a sort of a Facebook or a message board level sort of discussion. And a lot of these times where we need a more nuanced discussion actually needs to happen, they don't want to have it. Right? I mean, they've clearly made up their mind at this point, and I think the total number of people I have converted from, I'll say I've got some people from the middle of the fence of tipped over and okay, I give this a try. Oh wait, this is actually working pretty good. That has happened, but people who are like all the way on the other side, like, oh, low carb is stupid, it's a fad, it's dumb, carnivore is going to kill you. You're going to get colon cancer and heart disease and everything else. They've already made up their mind. They already have a great big pile of studies that is going to confirm everything that they already believe, because they live in this echo chamber. And I'll fully admit there are plenty of people on the low carb side that are exactly the same way too. But their mind is already made up. They are not willing to consider that there is a possibility that they're wrong. And honestly, the idea that I'm probably not right about things, in fact, there's probably a lot of stuff I'm wrong about, is exactly how I got to where I am now. I have a very firm belief that every single person I talk to knows something that I don't. And if I can find out what that is, I will grow a little bit. And I think that you're doing yourself a major disservice by not doing that, right? I mean, you even talking to vegans, it's like, okay, is there something to this whole hormesis argument where you're ingesting a poison and your body is becoming stronger against that poison? Maybe. I don't know. I know that works, with, I bash my muscles and they get stronger, right? So there is something to this argument, but let's look at this whole thing, holistically, and say that nobody has all the answers. Learn what you can from everybody else. Experiment on yourself. Find out what your own personal ecosystem reflects as truth for you, and go from there. Don't say that I have all the answers for you when you don't even have all the answers for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think that like I said, if you're looking for confirmation bias, look in the scientific literature. You can find a study to support anything. I mean, it's very easy. You can find it to
There,
support meat eating, vegetable eating,
there
low
was a
carb, high carb,
there was a great
anything.
image I saw, and I'll have to find it because this made the rounds some time ago. But it was a list of all these different behaviors, foods, whatever, and it was a graph that showed the amount of studies that said it cured cancer versus caused cancer, and there was this tremendous overlap of like, oh, this if you eat more grapes or whatever the hell it was, you're more likely to get cancer and less likely to get cancer. And it's like, well, clearly those can't both be true. So what does that mean? How do we actually interpret that? You have to interpret that to mean we don't know, right? Or you're going to go into the scientific data and find only the ones that support exactly what you're saying because there is some data to support anything. And I don't like when people say that there's scientific proof of this, that, or the other thing. There is no scientific proof. There's scientific evidence, and there may be very strong scientific evidence. There's very strong scientific evidence that says the sun's probably going to rise tomorrow. That's not proof. So, nuance is something that is strongly lacking in a lot of nutrition data and in people's interpretation of it. And God help me, the media's promotion of nutrition data, which just makes you want to tear your hair out whenever you read, something in Newsweek that says, oh, X, Y, or Z is going to kill you or make you live to be 200. And it's like, shut up. No, it's not. Some rat study, bullshit.
Yeah, that's great stuff to finish out on. I figured out why I couldn't use my headphones because I had the volume turned down to 0. So that makes sense. I'm glad I figured that at the end of this deal. So my headphones aren't broke. Dan, thank you very much for doing this. Tell folks
thank you.
Where they can go to follow you and find your wisdom and your humor, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So my most active account would be Steak and Iron, at Steak and Iron on Twitter. You can also find me, Dan Wiseman, in a lot of the keto and carnivore groups on Facebook. I'm pretty active on there. Carnivore for Beginners, zeroing in on health, those ones. You'll see me pop up every so often. I'll usually get yelled at because, in the Carnivore for diet for beginners groups and stuff, they'd be like, oh, can I have, this obvious plant on this diet? And I'm like, what is a carnivore diet? Like, it's the simplest thing in the world. Is it from an animal or not? And the people are like, oh, it's just, they're new. And it's like, okay, I understand. It's a bizarre concept on its face. But so they're on Facebook. And then on Reddit, I am Stupid Robots, plural. And I'm pretty active on there too in the keto boards, the carnivore boards and stuff as well. Come take a look. I swear a lot, so be aware of that. If you're going to try to get your 12-year-old kid to follow me on Twitter, there's probably going to be some F-bombs dropped. But we have fun. It's I like to kind of take the wind out of the sails of anybody who's just holding holding themselves maybe a little bit above the rest of us and say, let's all settle down and let's all have fun.
Yeah, great. I've occasionally used the swear word as well. So anyway, all right, guys, thank you very much. We'll see folks tomorrow. Dan, thanks again for appearing here and for what you're putting out on social media. All right.
Sean, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir. You have a great day now.
Take care, guys. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.